AstraZeneca vaccine was seen as one of the great successes of the COVID pandemic, credited with saving over 6 million lives in its first year. But in rare cases, it was also responsible for serious side effects like blood clots in the brain, which in some cases were fatal.
Now, the financial scheme set up to support people injured by vaccines has been criticised, with the payouts too low. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh has been to meet some of those affected.
OK.
Jane Wrigley used to be a runner. Now she can barely walk.
Do you want to hold my hand?
Yes, please.
OK.
Before I had the vaccine, I was a very independent, active woman doing half marathons, and now I have no independence. I can't even shower myself, can I?
No.
Jane suffered a blood clot in her brain 2 weeks after her first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine in March 2021 and required emergency surgery. As other cases emerged throughout Europe, doctors gave the vaccine-induced clots a new medical term, VIT. Lisa Shaw, a presenter at BBC Radio Newcastle, was 44 when she died, 3 weeks after her first AstraZeneca Covid vaccine. Her death was attributed to VIT blood clots. Lisa's husband Gareth is bringing up their son Zach on his own. He made a claim through a government scheme set up to support those harmed by vaccines and eventually received £120,000. The amount of this one-off payment hasn't increased since 2007.
She died because she took the product that the government told her to get, and they believe that £120,000 is what makes up for that loss. I think it's insulting. My son will go through the rest of his life without a mam.
Gareth waited a year for his payment, Jane 2 years. She agrees the money is inadequate.
It doesn't really compare to what it's taken away from me. I mean, Ian can't really work. I can't work either.
From 2000, there were an average of 2 successful claims a year under the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme. Post-Covid, there have been 188, all but a handful for the AstraZeneca vaccine. A further 253 people were told that although the vaccine was responsible for their injuries, they didn't meet the threshold of 60% disability and so get nothing. Of nearly 16,000 Covid vaccine claimants, around half have yet to be notified of the outcome. But the harms caused have to be set against the huge benefits of Covid vaccination. It's estimated vaccines prevented over 120,000 Covid-related deaths in the UK up to September 2021. Adam Finn was a member of the committee which advised the government on Covid vaccines.
The protection these vaccines were able to deliver rapidly, even just after the first dose, really saved a lot of people's lives.
But he believes the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme is flawed and needs reform.
At the moment, we're seeing what appears to be a fairly arbitrary compensation scheme, presumably designed to be simple and effective, but it's not really responsive to the level of disability that people experience, and it's certainly not changing over time as the cost of living rises.
Around 50 families affected by VIT blood clots are taking a group legal action against AstraZeneca for compensation. Both the Department of Health and AstraZeneca said their sympathy went out to anyone who had lost loved ones. The government says it will look closely at the concerns of affected families. AstraZeneca said it couldn't comment on ongoing litigation, but patient safety was its highest priority, adding, "Regulators around the world state the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks of extremely rare side effects." The legal case could take years to have a full hearing. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, our medical editor Fergus is here with us on the sofa right now, and Sarah Moore from Lee Day Solicitors, who are representing around 50 families taking legal action for further compensation. Morning, both of you.
Morning.
Sarah, what do your clients want?
Our clients desperately need the government and AstraZeneca to engage with them. They've made applications through the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme, which we heard about on the documentary, and unfortunately what is being provided at the moment is too little, too late to too few people. So they are having to bring this legal action because the scheme at the moment isn't fit for purpose. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And they need proper amounts of money to make sure that they can live out their lives, those who are survivors, with the dignity that they deserve. They've got extensive care needs, many of them. And on top of that, some of our clients are sadly bereaved, so they've lost main wage earners within the family, and there's a real deficit in terms of household income, and £120,000 just doesn't cut it, unfortunately.
Fergus, we're talking about the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme. It's not just a new thing that relates to COVID, it's been around a while.
Been around since the late 70s, and, you know, on average a couple of claims a year, but there've been more than double the number of claims for COVID jabs than in the entire history of the scheme. And almost all of those are for the AstraZeneca vaccine. So, you know, the COVID vaccine programme was a huge success. In its first 9-10 months of operation, estimated to have prevented over 250,000 hospitalisations, maybe 130,000 deaths. But a force for good can, on rare occasions, also be a force for harm. And there is this social contract. We all go and, you know, have our vaccines. So when, in the very rare circumstance, something goes wrong, people, I think, should expect that the state is there to support them. And Professor Adam Finn, who you heard from there, one of the leading vaccine experts, has said, look, you know, it's arbitrary at the moment and it needs a look at it. But Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has met with some of the families, and the government has said it's going to look at this as part of lessons of the pandemic.
Sarah, how often are you hearing from people who might inquire about what you're doing at the moment? I'm just wondering, you know, a couple of years down the line, people might look back and think, well, this happened to me, that happened to me. You know, what's the scale of injury?
I think the scale of injury is really significant. In terms of the numbers involved, we know that there were around 450 or so cases of this specific vaccine complication. So the legal action is focused on VIT, this vaccine-induced immune thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. And we are still getting client inquiries constantly, people wanting assistance. Unfortunately, the legal action, because of the limitation time period, we can't bring more people in, which again forces the point that we really need to have a statutory scheme that works. If we did, then the legal action would not be necessary, and we need the government to engage.
So what difference would that make if it was statutory?
So if it was statutory, there would be a way of applying to the scheme, and if the scheme was adequate, there would be money paid out. At the moment, the families that were engaged with are having to bring a legal battle, which is expensive, exhausting, and really galling for them, because they are fighting one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, which was indemnified by the British government, to try and prove that they deserve compensation. Whereas actually, they've already been told that their injuries are directly caused by the vaccine. They're being made to go through the courts. And, I mean, as we heard in the documentary, the court case will take years to come to trial. And in that time, these people are being left without enough money to cover mortgages and to pay, in some cases, for the bereavement counselling that their small children need as a result of these deaths.
And Fergus, you know, as you mentioned, the bigger picture here is that the vaccine saved lives, didn't it?
No, absolutely. And the bigger picture generally is that vaccines, you know, they very rarely have severe side effects, and they are an extraordinary health benefit. So it's absolutely crucial that anyone watching this doesn't say, well, maybe I shouldn't go and have this jab or that jab. All the vaccines which are recommended in the UK, the benefits of those vastly outweigh any risks. This is about a specific injury caused by the vaccine technology used in this vaccine, which is no longer used. It was also in another COVID vaccine that used the same technology. But it's really important for vaccine confidence, actually, that we do have a system that people have confidence in, so that, you know, we all continue to go and get our jabs.
And just remind us what AstraZeneca themselves have said.
So they said they can't comment on the ongoing litigation. They have sympathy for those who've been harmed, and they point out that the vaccine, you know, is credited with saving millions of lives, and that regulators around the world say that the benefits of vaccination greatly outweigh any potential risks.
OK, Fergus, Sarah, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you. And if you